Okay, we are on the air. Welcome to our August 19th work session. Councilor Stavenjord is not with us tonight, and Councilor Khosrowbani is on his way, but still 5 or so minutes out. But we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation on our stormwater system plan.
Thanks, Mayor Beatty and councilors. I'm Peter Passarelli. With me tonight is Scott Duran, our sort of lead consultant on our stormwater system plan. Just before, Scott's going to give a presentation of where we are in the plan and what we're looking at and where we're headed. This plan, we're actually a little bit behind schedule in terms of getting the work done. And I guess similar to both the water and the wastewater system plans, one of the things that we've found as we've gone through the updated plan and actually modeling the systems is we've found issues with some of the data that we have, in our GIS. And trying to get the model to do the things that we want to do, and models get updated with software, using different software. Often there's new data requirements that we need to have. So, we've spent probably most of the year trying to get the model and the data to work concurrently and to make sure that we were getting good results on that. And when I say the data, making sure that, that our elevations that we have in our sewer systems are based off of, not based off of fully surveyed data. It's based off of, as-builts and where else do we use, Scott? I don't have the elevations of those systems were. And that provided some challenges in some cases, putting the model together. And I think we're in a good place now. We've got the model working. It's providing some results that we think are consistent with what we see in the community, and it's identified perhaps some other places that are problematic as well. So that being said, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Before we go, I'm not sure I understand what the problem was.
Incomplete data.
So was the data missing, or was it incompatible with what we're trying to do?
A little bit of both. It was incompatible with what we're trying to do. And in some cases, I think we expanded the scope of the model too. So when we expanded that scope to maybe smaller pipe diameters, we didn't necessarily have that complete set of data that we needed to do to make the model work.
Yeah, I'd say the city has really good data and a really nice GIS department that has a lot of stuff, but we find a lot. We did Lodge's sewer model and found a lot of same things. It's like lots of great data. Unfortunately, you're not running these models all the time. It's set up. So the key is that there's lots of depths for catch basins and manholes. But you have to turn that into elevations to have a model run smoothly, because you think about how flat a sewer or a storm drain is, a few inches over a street can make a big difference for how the water moves through that. And so the problem with that is if you don't have the elevations surveyed in, small errors can magnify as you kind of look at the whole system. So that's some of the things that we ran into. And we also, on our end, we made a decision early on to use the existing model, which is an old model. There's a lot of good reasons to do that, but what we realized is that when you try to make an old model do new things, it breaks, and it breaks pretty bad. So we had to kind of go back and rebuild it and get it to work the way it should. So it's a challenge. I mean, the advantage of modern, last time it was updated was 2014. In 10 years, computing power is on. These models can do a lot more stuff, and we're tempted to do more with them and to look at more of the system, but that requires more data, to have meaningful outcomes. And so it's a process. It feels like when we do these master plans, we're kind of always just taking it one step further and getting better and getting more information to drive better plans.
So you go out and you survey, you measure these
we had our crews go out and field verify in certain locations where we needed to get that done. You know, when I was, back in my previous job in Illinois, we inherited lots of infrastructure from the Air Force that had compatibility issues, along with the issues of the compatibility that we had, or accuracy issues that we had with our internal systems. One of the ways to get around that was to go out and get it all surveyed. And we spent money to do that, but that was a lot of money. We got some funding, from the Air Force at the time we could do that. But, we spent, in terms of going out and surveying, storm and sanitary sewers to get, very accurate elevations of all of the structures. We spent close to $1 million just working on that. So expensive.
Yeah, it's a lot of, we did this on the wastewater plan too, is we can prioritize that data gathering, right? Like we can do some quick looks that'll tell us where there's potential problems and then hone in on those are the areas to spend the more money. So that's kind of where we're heading here with the stormwater. Thank you. Well, as Peter and John, I'm Scott Durden. I'm a vice president with Water System Consulting. We're here in Portland. And our team actually consists of a couple of partners. Parametrics is another company with offices in Portland that's helping us with the modeling piece. And then GSI Water Solutions is a injection control. They have a lot of expertise in dry wells and permitting those dry wells. So they're helping us with that part of the system. And we're going to talk about. So I'm going to give you a little overview of where we started, some of the things we were just talking about. The last master plan was done in 2014, and that was an update of the 2004 stormwater master plan, so these are going back a ways. What's changed since then? There are definitely new permit requirements. I mean, even since the last plan, you guys went through 2021, that's for permit, and now we're already getting ready for the next issuance of that permit. So every time those come out, there's some new things that we have to.
Those are going away under the new administration.
Just the funding for them. The system's getting older, right? We have aging infrastructure that's always needs to be. And kind of what I was bringing up, we have. As these models get better, sometimes what happens though, we look at more and we find more things that need to be addressed. So it's always good that we're continuing to evolve and look at the system. Wait, did I go back? Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. I did want to say, the other thing that's changed, you guys have done a lot. This is just a list of projects that have been done on the stormwater system. I mean, it's really impressive. A lot of the big capital improvement projects that were identified in 2014 have been projects that have been put in place to deal with those deficiencies. So really should be proud of all the work that's being done on the system. There's a few areas that haven't been tackled yet, and some of those might have needed certainty as to what needed to be done in those places. What we'll be focusing on, make sure those are actually still issues that need to be addressed in the system. And then the team, I think the engineering and public works have also done work in-house to kind of further these goals. So.
What is UIC decommissioning?
So that's what we take for injection wells, large dry wells that we, in areas where we don't have, storm sewer infrastructure that drains to waterways. If it's failed and not working as it's supposed to, we go through decommission.
Does that mean you fill it in or something?
Service, yeah. Take it out of service. And in some cases replace it.
I'll just say, I mean, this 2014 was before I was on council, but I do remember the discussion at the time because the council was presented with three cost scenarios, 3 rate scenarios, and there was some concern that they would go for the lowest, and they actually went for the highest, I think, or at least they did, and you know, to the surprise of some who were on council at the time, that they convinced them to do that. So, I mean, that's why, I guess, all of these things happen.
Yeah, and there are a couple projects that are still on there that we've got in our CIP, and some of them we're integrating with our other transportation projects. Some of them that were identified, we feel like maybe we might not need them now because New Street is one that's really alleviated some problems. There's a project associated with that we feel like we probably don't need to do now. So, yeah, but there's still some projects out there. There's a railroad project, railroad.
And then I guess the other thing we're looking at too is some of the planning. Let's do it and have some of the vision for the city and making sure we're incorporating that into the stormwater plans, the comprehensive plan in terms of growth strategy. You know, I think there's the housing corridors strategy of how to promote development. That's something that we want to look at in the respects of the stormwater plan, the climate action plan. Urban forestry is a big one too, because trees provide a lot of benefit for stormwater. So incorporating that into this plan, and then certainly make sure that we're using a lot of the same assumptions that we're drinking water. So the key elements of what's in this stormwater plan update, we're starting to look at the hydraulics of the conveyance system. We're also looking at growth and how the community, we think, you know, surface is going to increase across the city. We're going to look at climate change from the standpoint of where the system might be vulnerable to increased precipitation and different rainfall patterns. We're also looking at the regulatory drivers. You know, we have 3 different permits that are going to affect recommendations of this plan. There's the MS4 and PDS permit that includes some of the new TMDLs, which is the total maximum daily loads on the Willamette that end up becoming provisions in the next permit cycle. This summer around temperatures, the one that it's coming, and then the UAC, which is the underground injection control that covers all the dry wells.
So when you say hydraulics, I mean, in our wastewater system, we have pump stations that lift stuff up, but in this system, everything is gravity. Is there actually any mechanical part that moves stormwater?
Currently, everything is gravity or dry well. We do have a project on the Harvey project, where we will be installing a small stormwater pump station.
Yeah, for us, it's just, we call it the hydraulic model. So we think of like whether it's pumped or flowing in a pipe, that's hydraulics. And then we're looking at operations and maintenance and standards as well, because changes to your standards can also be a way to tackle some of these regulatory items. So I'll talk about regulatory first. I'm sure you guys are all pretty familiar with these, but that's the map of the city with where everything flows. So the green and the purple and the yellow, those are all surface water drainages. They're either going to Johnson Creek, Kellogg Creek, or the Mount Scott, which is eventually going to Kellogg Creek. And then the tan, I think, right along the river, that's going directly into the Willamette. And that salmon color area that's the dry well area. So that kind of tells you what the 2 different permits and where their jurisdictions are going to come into play.
What are the dark red areas, those little dots across the map?
They look the red, I think, because the border of those is red, but they're actually dry well. There's some little areas that have dry well. They're certified dry wells.
And some of that's a function of just not having extensive infrastructure in that area, like off of that 36th Avenue. I think that's a project that we've identified. We need to build more infrastructure to handle that. But often in the past, we've chosen maybe a fix that was quicker to solve a problem. So there's dry wells there. That makes sense.
That's a whole piece.
So, yeah, the MPDS permit is a big one. That one has most of the, I think, really drives a lot of the decision making. So the last permit was 2021. There was an update in 2023 to cover pesticides. And then, as you guys know, the city is one of 12 co-permittees for Clackamas County. So you've got a lot of partners in your permit there. It addresses all of the stormwater discharge to the Willamette and its tributaries. And then there's a stormwater management plan that we're not going to try to rewrite in this master or the system plan, but we're leveraging a lot of those policies that are set out in the management plan to kind of feed into what we do in the system. And then the key is everyone's getting ready for the new permit application cycle in 2026. And that will likely, it seems like every time they add something, right? So we'll likely have some new items. So this is just to kind of show aspects of the stormwater management system plan that won't likely be impacted by the system plan that we're working on. Those will likely be pretty similar to what you've seen in the past, but the three arrows there, the hydro modification is one place where I think as we're modifying the growth and where impervious surface areas are going to be coming in, that does impact how flow concentrates in your stormwater systems. Pollution monitoring plan, the new temperature TMDL is likely going to lead to a temperature component of that plan. So, and then in the past, they've always included one of the provisions to identify a stormwater retrofit project and execute that within the planning cycle. So that'll likely be fit into a capital improvement project that would be part of the stormwater system plan.
Yeah, this stormwater management plan that Scott's sort of briefly talked about, this is the document that we developed internally and outlines what are the best management practices that we use to manage stormwater to ensure that, that the surface water that's going into the water bodies are as clean as possible. So it's sort of but it's more of a qualitative document for the most part. It's like, there's an education and outreach component to it. There aren't like sort of strict discharge parameters associated with this permit like you would have at a wastewater treatment plant. So it's sort of qualitative in nature, and it's sort of managed through best management practices. And we have our environmental service coordinator as that person that really provides that oversight and management of that program, working with our stormwater team and natural resources team to make sure that we're meeting our compliance requirements.
And did I understand you to say that the permitting agencies, is that DEQ or is that, will call out a specific project they want us to do? They'll like make it a condition of our permit or something?
No, I think in the last permit, they just said that each of the co-permittees should complete one. Maybe leave it to you and decide what that would be. I want to see that you're, making some progress towards stormwater quality.
So did I understand you say that they were going to put in a temperature regulation for discharge of the Willamette? Is there anything there now?
We are, they're sort of strengthening the regulations as it relates to that total maximum daily load, because, the stream is impaired by, or not the stream, but the Willamette is impaired by temperature. So, it sort of works on a qualitative basis, but there's going to be more monitoring associated with it, looking at how do we improve and shade riparian corridors, looking at sort of shade gap analysis and all those types of things that really sort of rely on that we see from our urban forest and along those riparian corridors. We do have, I think we actually have a meeting this Friday with DEQ to talk a little bit about like the next steps on this
Up
implementation.
at Johnson Creek Water, Shed Council, they got an ongoing project now, right?
Yeah,
For
make the bill come out,
to
yeah.
abate the temperature
Yeah.
process.
So I was curious about that because we were told, we had a recent presentation by them, that part of their idea is to, by staging logs along, that they'll diffuse the water as it comes out of the creek so that it'll be, a wider, I guess. But is that really affecting the temperature of the Willamette? If the water's X temperature and there's so much water, does how it actually gets into the Willamette impact the temperature?
I mean, I think there's an incremental component to it, so I mean, it does.
Yeah.
It's an improvement that can be made. I would say, one of the things we'll be talking about tonight is the Kellogg Dam removal. That project is something that will have an impact on temperature as well.
Oh, yeah, that's probably the single biggest thing we can do.
And that's something that, we've talked with DEQ about, and, as a consideration of like making sure that we're getting credit for that type of work as well, and in our T&D requirements, so.
Well, I'm thinking that really what they're doing at the Johnson Creek is that they're almost like diffusing a liquid heat sink. In other words, there's a certain volume of water that has a lot of heat in it. And if they weren't diverting it and spreading its discharge out into the river, then there's less volume, there's less mass for that heat to retain its heat. And therefore, when it's spread out, it lowers the temperature incrementally. I don't know how much, but that kind of makes sense. But it's, that would be a lot of man.
Yeah, there's a lot of work going on up and down the Willamette on this topic. There's shade trading and shade banking and all kinds of things going on. So anyway, yeah.
All of these, these TMDL requirements and these things in the permit, they all are sort of like unfunded mandates, right? So these are requirements that we get from, regulators to say, you have to do this to improve these, to improve these issues. So, and generally, we don't get like a direct source of funding to make those improvements. So, that is one reason why we have a stormwater utility. Not only is it to, manage the quantity of flow, but it's to make sure that the quality is there too, right? So that we're not impairing the streams through our urban environment.
We're jumping on my next slide, which was saying temperatures coming. I think we have it pretty good. It's similar with the mercury and bacteria. It's kind of like they just want to know that you're doing things to minimize the risk. It's pretty hard to sample for those, so it's more like a qualitative policy-based requirement. The UIC, the underground injection control, the dry wells, that one, the application was already submitted at the end of 2024. So we pushed a portion forward quickly to help with that, the system-wide review of the 205 dry wells in the system. We haven't, I think the latest is the application hasn't yet been reviewed and nothing's come back from DEQ, but it's in the process there, and I thought I'd just show you that the good news is there's no compliance issues that were detected in the assessment. It's kind of hard to see, but on the left, that the circles are the 2-year time of travel around your well fields for the drinking water system. And even though we're showing some of the dry wells are within that 2-year time of travel, the groundwater table is so much farther below the bottoms of these dry wells that they're not at risk of influencing the groundwater. So that's why we're able to say that they're in compliant and they're not presenting a risk to human health.
So are the red blocks are the water wells?
The red are the dry wells that are within the 2-year time
Oh, I
of
see.
the water wells. And then the colored contours is kind of the depth of groundwater. And I think the pinkish color is 91 to 100 feet, and most dry wells aren't going any deeper than 30 feet. So pretty high above the groundwater table.
This is something that, like during development, that we review to see if, is the developer looking to put in a dry well? What is its proximity to our dry wells?
Can you just help me understand, is the elevation in that part of town, or why are we seeing so many wells in that part of town? Is it because they were disconnected, it was unincorporated back in the day? And
Because they're farther from the waterways.
And the topography of the area, it's challenging to get the water to flow like
Sure.
to get to the water to the streams.
I think it was a lot cheaper too to put in dry wells and have everything just drain out than it was to build the whole stormwater system. So whenever they could do it, they did it. Okay, so then talking about hydraulics, we've been running the model, kind of looking at the existing system, existing rainfall. There's, like we mentioned, some of the challenges early, but we've got a few areas of interest. We're still working through that to see if those actually need projects associated with them, or there might be some other solutions, but I circled a few of those. The industrial park is one area of concern. It's just because it's kind of sits in that low area and the sewer's the storm system's pretty flat. There is some storm piping near the Dave Green wetlands up in the northeast corner. It seems like it may have some capacity issues. And then the area in the southeast, which is the Apple Plum Hemlock, that was an area that was actually identified in the last master plan. And it's also coming up for us. So I feel like that's there's probably going to be some improvements needed there. And then there's a small section in the Island Station neighborhood along the railroad that is showing up as having some capacity challenges. So we're in the process of working through this with staff to figure out what is the right solution. But we're hoping to find a few spots.
So when you reference the Dave Green wetlands, which I think you get a kick out of, those are on private property, right? The city doesn't own the property?
We don't own the property, but we have adjacent infrastructure that has that takes some
Discharges stormwater.
I think there's actually a line that runs through that property, right, that connects, and
Yeah.
there's some issues there in terms of like the capacity. So we have some pipes that actually sit.
Yeah.
So wait, we are taking water from the private property, or we are putting water onto the private property?
I think they just kind of cross through. I don't know for sure if there's an easement or anything like that, but they're in close proximity. I'm not
Yeah,
sure if
there's a little bit of both. There's a little bit of water coming from the wetlands that we pick up. It's mainly street runoff. Right.
I'm really surprised about the apple plum, because that's been a problem for a long time. I guess I thought it had been resolved since we don't hear complaints about it, but that's been an area where I remember when I was on planning commission, like 2008, going on a van trip to look at places that it floods the most, and that those were called out back then.
We did some minor improvements along Harmony in-house that might have alleviated some of the bigger problems. Or at least reduce the frequency, but it's still an issue, and it's still a project that we have in the CMP, and it's a substantial project, yeah.
Well, actually, this map just kind of shows the pockets of infill growth that kind of align with the same assumptions used in the water and the wastewater master plan, where we use the buildable lands inventory that was done for those supported those efforts. That aligns with city comp plan. And we assume for the purposes of stormwater, for those other plans, it was a lot about like, well, how many new connections are you going to get? What's that going to drive the flow? For stormwater, it's more about an impervious area. So we made some assumptions about maxing out the amount of impervious surface based on your current zoning codes and use that to estimate what might come down the road in terms of growth. So bottom line though, it doesn't actually add that much flow. So we're not seeing like a lot of growth within the city as being a huge risk to the stormwater system in terms of capacity.
I think that has an impact too, when we look at our CIP and it impacts what those SDCs might look like, right? So, SDCs are focused on providing a revenue source for development and how development impacts or how growth impacts our infrastructure. If we're not seeing significant hydraulic issues related to growth, that means probably the SDCs will be smaller on stormwater, and they are pretty low. But we haven't done that analysis, but I'm thinking that's probably where it's headed.
So we mentioned climate. This slide might take a second to explain. What you're looking at here is on the graph. It's time. So we look at like a 3 to 4 day storm event, and its flow is on the vertical axis. So the staggered.
Doesn't show on the TV screen, unfortunately.
Well, the mountain on the left is basically looking at 2-year, 25-year, 100-year storms and kind of the different flow. It's kind of, it's a design storm that we use to evaluate the system where we're trying to replicate, a certain return interval because we typically design our stormwater containment systems for 25-year storms. We don't design them for the 100-year storms like we do a levee or something like that. But the pink lines on the right, that is taken from a model, a combination of climate change models. We took the average of several that look out and replicate rainfall out to 2080, and that was a representative storm. So you kind of see like relative to the intensity, the peak is almost as high as a 100-year storm, and it's kind of like back-to-back storm events right on top of each other as a way to take all this climate modeling data that's been done, apply it to this city and see where the vulnerabilities are. So we're still in the process of working that one out, and we won't likely recommend that you upsize anything for this potential unpredictable future event, but it does help us maybe prioritize where we already know we have the CIP project and we know it's an area that's heavily vulnerable. We want to prioritize medical safety.
So is the base for this, the FEMA model?
There is like a series of climate models, and Washington State has one. Well, there's, I don't know, 3 or 4 that people have taken the global models and they've brought it down to a regional model. So what our team did is took the average and kind of looked at the statistical analysis to say what would be a future 25-year return interval of these like changing precipitation patterns. So there's a lot of like, it's kind of like a data-driven best guess at what might happen over the next.
Well, I'm all for using something beside the FEMA model. It's not any good.
I think the big basis of it was the work that they did at the University of Washington.
Yeah, that was more
Just
universal.
regional Pacific Northwest sort of climate modeling. So yeah, we're not, it's not,
It's putting reality into the climate change situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's really taken like, it's more atmospheric like modeling and then trying to turn that into rainfall for our region and then kind of make a decision right about what we should do.
So I don't understand the time axis at the bottom. So the first series of events that you say is like the current 2-year, 25-year, all
Well-
happen in day one and the other takes to day 4 to happen?
No, think of each line as a completely separate event that we run through the model. We're just kind of showing them so you can see the relative magnitude.
Okay.
And then we all set it just so it's easier to tell. It doesn't mean the time much shouldn't really be on there, but the reality is it's a 24. Most of us design around a 24-hour storm. It's like a statistical. That's what all the ones on the left are.
Okay.
But using these models, it's not as easy to just clip out a 24-hour period. So it can have a little bit longer of a time frame to capture this like storm event that we're running through the whole building. It's still kind of the worst. So this is the best depiction I had at the moment, but we'll probably be able to turn this into something that's a little bit easier to understand. And the other thing we're looking at is trees. The graphic is CTAC. It's a more of a parametric system, but we're going to be looking at the tree cover canopy and seeing where there are opportunities within the city to prioritize maybe target tree planting as a way to also help with some of the stormwater quality and water quality. So right now we're a little bit limited in that Metro's LiDAR data is 2019. New data soon. It's 2026, right?
2026, yeah.
So there will be a chance to take a fresh look at that.
So that's not us.
That's not you guys, yeah. It's just, you guys see those like a way to see the relative cover and within each basin, and you can kind of see
Oh,
where,
those are the runways.
where your opportunities are. Yeah. No trees in the runway. Okay. And then on the operations and maintenance side, what we have going is we kind of grouped all the stormwater system assets into 5 buckets. There's the ponds and the rain gardens, there's some open conveyance channels, you got all your catch basins and manholes, and then the dry wells. So the city has a really good system for capturing condition. You've invested in CityWorks. And so a lot of that has already been going on where there's good data. What we realized we didn't have data on was the rain gardens, and partly because some of those are privately owned and supposed to be privately maintained, but they fall into this gray area where the city ends up maintaining them. And so we're capturing, the city teams are right now gathering data on those assets that we want to bring in into an analysis of one, where are there opportunities for rehab and repair. Maybe even sometimes replacement, but also how much time is this requiring of city operations staff to kind of manage all of this. So those are 2 of the things we're looking at. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. So we're expecting that work to be done in the fall and be able to come back with some recommendations around what it takes to maintain the system, both in terms of staffing and then like our rehabilitation budgets. And then the last thing we're looking at is a lot of these rain gardens are actually great spots to plant a tree. And so we're looking at that element of it as well as which ones of these are very conducive to tree planting, if that was something that.
So when you say rain gardens, you mean the swales? Or do you mean any rain garden? I mean, there's
We're kinda
swales that
yeah.
are in the right of way that are, do belong to the city, right? I mean, they are built privately often, but they do ultimately belong to the city. But then also people disconnect, run their rain gutters into it and build their own rain garden on their property or whatever. So you're talking about both of those scenarios or?
Primarily the,
Well, I can tell you from having built one, they made me put trees in it. I had big trees on my property and I didn't think I needed more trees, but they made me put trees in it. And so, hopefully they're doing that to everybody. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Here. I guess the other thing we're looking at that does affect the water quality across the city is the standards. So right now, the standards are based on some of the requirements that were built to 26 Portland's stormwater management manual for 2016, including a tree credit that you can use to offset impervious area on your property. So, but what we're looking at is, I think one of the challenges that have been brought up is that developers sometimes they're used to running on those manuals, so they kind of submit on the new requirements, but there's a lot of like explaining that has to be done about what the city requires. And then there's differences, right? Like there's Clackamas West just came out with some new standards. Portland has updated their manual a few times. So we want to look at those, talk it through, and there's certainly administrative requirements that city like Portland or a large agency like West has advantages that a city like Milwaukie doesn't have, right? So wanting to right size those things and make it manageable. So that's one of the things we're looking at too. And then I'll close with kind of our timelines and where we're at. We've got the model going, we're running it now. We're going to be wrapping up the climate vulnerability in the fall. And then we'll be preparing our, around winter time, we should be ready to have a capital improvement plan with actual recommendations in terms of spending and ready. And then we'll get the draft of the plan together that I'm sure you all will get a chance to look at and looking to finalize in the spring of 2026.
I think if I could just go back to that one slide there, the last one, the standard slide. So like, this is like the requirements that we put on development and also like on our infrastructure, right? So we want to look at like, what's the consequence of changing the standards that we use, right? Those Portland standards they have, like as Scott mentioned, there's a lot of administrative requirements that, and stormwater requirements that are required of developers and residential property owners. And we want to make sure that we've got what's the right fit for the city. So we're looking at, the Portland manual, county manual. I think when Steve Adams was still here, Steve had wanted to look at using the Clackamas County Stormwater Manual. He felt like that one was maybe a little bit more streamlined and easier to use. So we want to look at that, but also understand if we're going to switch, what's the consequence? What does that really mean to us in terms of how we, manage our stormwater program? And, if we change something, is there some unforeseen consequence of suddenly would we have additional requirements that we didn't realize? We want to sort of be deliberate and understand what it means to change that standard.
The third option is to build our own, but ideally, if we can use one of the other ones, I would probably prefer it. It's a lot of work to put that together. But we find things that we like in all of them, we could pull it together and make our own, potentially.
So you just think the Portland one is a bit administratively cumbersome? Is that what I'm hearing, Peter?
Well, it puts some requirements on property owners in terms of, we have these O&M requirements where we require maintenance agreements with residential property owners for stormwater quality facilities. And I think my understanding is some language in there, like that includes like downspouts. So, and those requirements require us to go out and, make sure that somebody's submitting these O&M documentation when they build. So we want to make sure that we've got that right sized. And we referenced that manual in our stormwater management. We want to make sure that we're not creating, undue burden on residential owners and ourselves.
Well, I don't want to have any requirements that we're not going to have any compliance regime for. Makes that to a certain extent.
And those are additions since the 2016 Portland Code? Or
There's
it already?
significant changes, yes, between the plans.
Interesting.
Yeah. And some things are good and some things were like, oh. So. We gotta go through it all.
And we, in managing our rain gardens, our green infrastructure too, we want to make sure that I got one person right now that does that, Stevens, he takes care of 150 plus rain gardens with some seasonal help, and we want to make sure that the requirements that are outlined in those manuals are easy for us to maintain and do, and achieve the goal that we need to do, so.
I feel like West makes sense, just, I mean, they're right here. They're the ones doing our water treatment.
It might, and it might tie into our MS4 permit too nicely, so, but we're gonna take the time and do the work, see what makes sense.
Other questions?
I think that's all we want to say.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. Well, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing a final product or maybe another check-in before that.
Thank you all.
All right, next we have, we didn't get an agenda today, so I don't even know what we have. We have something else before the Kellogg Dam, I know that.
Facilities update?
Oh, it's the, yeah, it's the new bird show. This is very exciting. I'm going to go out and take a picture.
So I was a man, people have never really guessed. Under JCB, solar and PSP seismic projects. And I really, one thing I do want to do before we skip projects is just to recognize these some fantastic project management skills for both of those projects. She pretty much single-handedly took these projects from concept through design to through construction completion, and did a fantastic job. Got them done on time, and I think on the solar one under budget. So all of them, both of them were within budget. We saved money on that one too, and actually increased the size of the solar array that we're able to put. Andy, thank you. Well done.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Good evening, or good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to just report back. I'm excited to give this update on these projects that they were pretty fun to put together and go through. So I'm gonna go through PSB seismic first and then JCB solar, but if anyone has questions during, and I'll try and make up some time here. So first of all, with PSB seismic, the public safety building, we started off in 2022 with a grant from the Business Oregon for 1.2 million. And then in 2023, Peterson Structural Engineers came on board with the design contract, and we issued the construction RFP. And then in 2024, that's when we had 2KG awarded the contract, and construction happened in March through November of 2024. We had various scope items, a variety of interesting things to do in the building, which was it seemed pretty complex at first, but once we had 2KG on board and we were up and running, it really went very much smoother than we were thinking it was going to. With an occupied building and everything, there were complications, but 2KG was very efficient. And I'm just going to take you through some project photos showing what the work looked like, because some of this work happened behind the walls and above the ceilings where you might not even know we were there if you went by today. So here we have some of the bracing that we did, equipment bracing in the fire bay, the first two photos, and then just an example of the furniture bracing. You can see the brackets down at the bottom of that cabinet. And I mentioned before how efficient 2KG contractors were during the construction, especially during the furniture bracing, because If you left your office to go to lunch or something, you had to kind of make sure your furniture was where you wanted. There were a couple of times when people came back and stuff was bolted to the floor.
Oh, my God.
So, we chuckle about it, but some people did not. My filing cabinet doesn't belong there. So here's an actual example of the FRP, which is fiber reinforced polymer. So we had to peel back the drywall and expose the actual CMU below and then apply the FRP there to the CMU. And the one on the left with the two big X's is an example of a location where they did a pull test. So they attached pucks to the sticky stuff and then tested the strength of it before it gave out to make sure it was to the specification that the engineer had laid out. But this is an example, when you go there today, these walls have been covered back up and painted, and you can't really tell anything happened.
And did this happen, I mean, I recall that this was sort of about what do you call it, a command center space, but did this happen in a lot of spaces in the building? Or was it just really one sort of central area or something?
It was a few different spots.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was kind of scattered throughout based on the engineer's calculations of which walls needed to do what in the event of an earthquake. I'm just making sure. Yeah, okay. So here are just two other different scope items. One here on the left, we've got some steel connections to the CMU and one of the stairwells. And then at the fire bay where the sectional doors are, we put steel framing around each one of those doors and replaced the doors as well. At the screening wall, which is over by the generator in the back parking lot, we put bracing on to keep that from falling over. And then we got this beautiful dedication plaque in the lobby. Kind of the conclusion for PSP Seismic. Another shout out to Mike Harmon for all of his help and coordinating with the contractor and staff furniture and all the staff for just being really easy to work with.
And Mike Harmon's our lead facility technician, yeah, so Mike spent quite a lot of time over there, working, moving, getting things moved and helping sort of smooth over things with the team as work was happening, so.
So now, obviously, some of this you have to have special people and special skills to do, but were there things out of this, like the anchoring furniture, that we might apply on our own elsewhere in our
Well, my
facility?
understanding from Mike is that we do over a certain threshold of height, that facilities does anchor things.
Okay.
But the engineer on this project's threshold was lower. It was 4 feet or taller. Needed to be bolted down, so. Anything else before we go into solar? Okay.
Was there a specific seismic data point that they engineered this to? Was it, like 9.0 on the Richter scale?
Oh,
Or?
I'll have to find that one out. I don't recall.
I would say be surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know what that was. We'll find out. Yeah.
Okay, for Johnson Creek Solar Campus, in 2023, again, we got some grant funding from the Department of Administrative Services, $375,000. And in 2024, we issued the construction and design RFP and awarded the contract to Elemental Energy, who completed it earlier this year in February, March. So as we discussed in the staff report on this one, we really were able to maximize the solar panel coverage based on the roof size and the electrical capacity. And this resulted in a 164.8 kilowatt system. which was more than what we had proposed in the grant application, and provides 85 to 90% of the current load.
And I'll say that's like sort of the best case scenario, like when the sun's really shining all day long and, there's not that cloud cover.
Have we already seen utility savings then from, yeah?
We have,
Great.
yeah. I think
Financial stability.
we had a couple days, there's been a couple days this summer where, we've maxed the system out in terms of what it's been able to do. And that's right about 1 megawatt. So.
Okay, so here's some pictures just during the installation of when we were putting the roof attachments, the racking on. This was again done in February, so I think I remember maybe 1 or 2 days when it was too icy and they had to avoid going on the roof, but I was not clear that you could do a roof install on a metal roof like this in the dead of winter. Here we are with putting the panels on, and installation overall took about 5 weeks with the connection. And then I got this fancy video today from the contractor who did a drone video out there on a nice sunny day, once everything was installed.
Needs to go to the website.
He's not.
Yeah, I sent it to Jordan as soon as I got it. And then lastly, we do have a portal on the website that shows real-time data.
Very cool.
So you can go check it out and
That's awesome.
yeah.
So the energy, we don't have battery storage. It's just going into the grid. It's just going,
It's behind the meter, so we use it, and then we have a net metering agreement with PG&E, so anything that we're not using goes back out into the grid.
I mean, I would love to think about a second phase and some battery storage and a resilience hub there.
We have had several conversations with PG&E on doing that. I mean,
They have some programs that provide incentives to do that. I think Energy Trust does as well. We did look at it with this project, but we just didn't have the budget at the time to do that. Or really sort of the time to get that done this iteration. It's something that we're certainly interested in doing.
We heard yesterday, a couple of us were at Hillside, and they are doing a resilience hub in buildings there at Hillside, but we heard the new Head Start Center on Monroe is also trying to do that, but those are obviously, small scale, and, it'd be nice to have one on the east side of town.
When you say it goes back to the grid with PG, does that mean that ends up going to households? Is PG charging households for our power?
Say that again? Are they?
So the extra energy that we generate from that, since we don't have better, they're paying us, okay.
So PG use that. But,
Gotcha.
I mean, it's not a whole lot.
So then are they then using the power that we generate to power households, and then they're making money off of that?
They use it wherever those electrons go. Most of it don't.
Yes.
We're using it.
Of course, yeah.
Lots of it.
I'm not worried about our part.
Remember, engineering moving soon, so we've got quite a few more laptops coming.
When you have solar charge, you have EV chargers.
And we're adding more. I mean, that's one of the things that we'll see is, that 85 to 90% probably change as we continue to make adjustments to our fleet and have more EVs and more EV charging. That's another project that we've been discussing with PG&E on the western side of our campus where our barn is and where we have the vehicles. We've been talking with them about using some of their grant programs to build out some additional EV charging infrastructure, which will require some changes to sort of our service coming into the site as well. And that will allow us to, like, when we go and replace our, one of our sweepers, we can get an MD sweeper. So we'll have charging capacity to charge a sweeper.
Nice. Well, these are both, I'm really excited to have both of these projects done. They were things we talked about for some years, and big kudos to Rep. Gamba for getting us the $375,000 from the summer. I texted him to tell him we were going to do this today. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here, but I know he was happy to see that work. Maybe we'll have some other opportunities down the line. Thank you, Mandy. Yeah. That's building. There you go. Okay, and now the Kellogg Creek dam removal, which
Thanks, Nikki.
Almost 1 second.
He said enough. I'll just keep going. I think time's going to be somewhat limited, so I think we'll get to the meat of this conversation and have some good discussion. I'm Joseph Brilio. I'm the Assistant City Manager here. I'm joined by Pastor Elliott, Works Director, Jim Beverly, City Manager, Andy Bird, Development Project Manager. We're kind of your many city staff that have participated in the Kellogg Restoration Community Enhancement Project, formerly known as Kellogg Dam Project. We've changed the name to get more benefits that's providing just removing the dam. There are many other staff that have participated in this endeavor for many years, but this is kind of your main core team, I think, right now for some of the bigger ticket items that we've discussed. As you saw in the staff report, we have been making quite a bit of progress, and I guess I'll need shout out to our project partners here. Nick Wicks in the house, and Neil Navy, good to see you here. Also, I'll just start off by saying we have ODOT as partners, Jonathan Horowitz, and Kelly Romero are great on the leadership team, as well as April McEwen, who might be online. I imagine she's part of. I want to say American Rivers, but it's River Logic now. It's kind of all one and the same thing. But the team has been fantastic to work with. We've had a great relationship, and we've made obviously lots of progress together. This conversation tonight is nothing to do with that, but has a lot to do with what we do here in the city, which is try to do many projects and think about many projects at the same time. So that is what we're going to be talking primarily about. Is we have run into some sticky wickets, so to speak, that need a little bit of daylighting and discussion to help clear the air and help prioritize staff, because we just don't feel comfortable, or even, it rises above our pay grade, so to speak. So that's why we're having some conversations. I won't bore you on the projects. I feel like you all are very aware of what the project is, but I think it's just good to know and see again how big the project area actually is. It's not just removing the dam, which is at the far top corner of the screen, but it goes back all the way to Oakfield Road. It's around 14 acres. It's a huge project area, and the city owns a substantial piece of it. The story behind how we got here today is that it's been a funding story, but it's certainly not been. It's certainly also been an advocacy story. So the city has advocated for this project and aspired to have this project done for decades. It really was in the last 5 years that we started to get some momentum. That's been primarily due to funding to make things become more real. And the big item there is being the $15 million grant from NOAA Fisheries that really made this project come to life and really build momentum. as those monies have been primarily for permitting and getting us through the design phase, setting us up for construction. As with any project, big or small, and when you work with a team, you hit tension points, and you also hit these points of, we thought that problem was not as big as we thought at the beginning, but it's actually pretty critical. And there's some other problems or issues you thought were going to be huge, but then are actually not as big as you once thought. So we've kind of run into the former, which is we got some issues that we didn't know were going to be as big as they're turning out to be. These are critical issues that we wanted to highlight today and get your feedback on. The first one being the sewer line relocation. Second one, conservation easements, and lastly, Kellogg point, because it's placement adjacent to the Kellogg project. We'll take them one at a time, but we certainly feel like the sewer line probably needs a lot more time, so we're gonna start with that. The other two, I think we can go somewhat quick. Let's jump into the sewer line relocation. Before we do, any questions about the project overall? Things of that nature? Great. So in the staff report, as well as our partners over at Milwaukie and American Rivers sent some comments as well. The sewer line that we've come in and run into an issue with is over at the Lake Village Apartments, I think is where it starts and runs across the impoundment towards, that's the other line, apartments. So that's where that red circle is. In the middle of the screen, that's the line that we're talking about when we talk about the sewer line relocation. And this sewer line has come up as a barrier for design and restoring the whole impoundment area up to overflow level. So the upstream and downstream impacts are created. There is another little dam potentially right here. There's been some design options that have been thrown out by the design team. There's 3 of them. I'll kind of speak to some of those, as well as there's some other potential considerations we have when we think about this sewer line. Part of the issue is, or the issue is that we're dealing with is removing that sewer line, so there's no longer a barrier, which is great, so we can get full restoration of the impoundment area. However, there's costs associated with it. It's a fairly substantial project that it creates, and there's some elements to prioritizing CIP and where it stands on other projects. So we talked about how certain projects relate to other projects. This is the feedback we need to get.
Yeah, and to add to what Joseph has said, I've looked at this like sewer line piece sort of like separate from the larger project and looking at it from the context of our affordability goal and what are the impacts to our wastewater ratepayers, right? So we have a project that's been identified as a need for this Kellogg dam. It hadn't been identified prior to this. It's not in our CIP, it's not in our future work plan. And how would we handle not just the financial implications related to that project, but how would we handle it in terms of managing it with our staff that are working on other projects? So those are 2 of the big things that we're looking at. And then also looking at that line, which is the grafted line. It's in good condition. It does have some small sags, but my crew in terms of reviewing it and looking at further inspections, and it's in good condition. It does not need replacement. Might need replacement in a couple decades, but doesn't need replacement right now. So it's sort of a but for this project, we wouldn't be doing this project, this sewer line relocation. So the other component of it too is I think what's the preferred alternative from Consor and the team is the design team is to replace the line with a pump station. So that would require a lot of work associated with getting, the easements necessary from adjacent property owners and building and constructing that pump station, and then the long-term operation and maintenance costs associated with operating that pump station. So in terms of operational impacts, I would say, right now, we take care of 5 pump stations, sanitary sewer pump stations in the community. We don't have any pump stations in this area. We have one over in Island Station that does do some pumping, but we don't have anything in Fairmont Lodge. So once it crosses the creek, it connects to West's line, trunk line, and goes to the wastewater. So we don't have a sanitary sewer pump station that we operate and maintain.
That really puzzles me because if you go down into that Miramont Lodge apartments and you think about the level of the creek, it seems to me it's considerably lower than the West plant. That there's not already an existing pump station that's getting that wastewater from the Miramont Lodge to the plant. I find very puzzling.
Not that we maintain. So, I don't believe there is.
Can you help clarify for me my ignorance here? Explain the difference between a pump station versus a pipe and what the trade-offs are.
Okay, so the gravity lines going from the higher elevation to the lower elevation, so just
Sewage
water
water down.
it's going to seep the lower elevation. So we use a pump station or a lift station.
So right now, sewage is flowing from Miramont over up into Lake Road, or the other way.
It's flowing the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going this downhill there.
So everything in that dotted orange is going into that pipe.
Yeah, that's that.
The pump station would then take everything in the orange
And
up to Lake Road?
pump it up to Lake Road.
Okay.
So, and you can't tell from the two-dimensional piece, but there's some sufficient elevation. There's some substantial elevation change there from where the, really, this is the apartment complex that Joseph was talking about, the Lake the apartments. So we're looking at potentially a pump station in this sort of general location to be able to take that wastewater there.
And can you explain to me why you wouldn't do a raised pipe or some other treatment that's still, like why a pump station as opposed to other pipes?
I think, one of the other alternatives was a raised pipe with going across the creek. I think there's some benefit to certainly keeping that infrastructure out of the flood zone. So, that's a potential impact.
Are you going to go through the options or not?
I wasn't specifically going to go.
Okay, well, I'll just chime in here. My understanding is the raised pipe was actually more expensive.
I think they were
comparable.
They were comparable in
But
cost.
all 3 options require pump station.
Okay.
And we're trying to restore a natural area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Costs for behavior between 3.5 to 5 million.
And so, so the preferred alternative was to pump up to Lake Road. So, the consideration and the impact there is the long-term operations and maintenance cost involved in operating, the energy costs that our crews going out there and inspecting and maintaining and responding in the middle of the night when the pump fails. Those types of costs that we don't have right now. So, and there's an impact there that, but for this project, we wouldn't be doing that.
That's where my questions are. I actually have 2 questions that coincide with that. A, what that impact would be estimated on our ratepayers, and then B, if we wait 20 years from now, is that a bigger impact on our ratepayers because we waited? So I'm looking at 2.
Yeah, so what would be the impact of rate payers? I've asked our rate consultants to look at that analysis. They've They've given me some preliminary results that I have some more questions on. It didn't look like in their analysis that they had included all of the operations and maintenance costs. And I want to make sure that they factored in. I don't think that they have factored in the cost associated with the Lakeview apartments and what requirements that we're going to have to provide them service. Because right now, they're all gravity. There's going to be a component where we'll have to probably make some modifications to how that is in that plan as well. So they're looking at that as part of our water and wastewater rate study.
And I know they don't have a crystal ball. Is there a way to kind of estimate what it might be and if we waited? Like I know there's not a specific number, but is there a way to estimate kind of what the inflationary cost might be if we waited 10 to 20 years?
We could certainly figure out the inflationary cost, like to replace that pipe. So, I would advocate for sort of like, non-excavating replacements. So pipe bursting, slip lining, the pipe is structurally sound, and maybe there's some reinforcement impact, but I think, fundamentally, there's this issue of adjusting the channel, right? The channel and where the pipe rests right now, there's some, it's challenging to be where it is, right? So there are probably some alternatives that could be considered there that probably don't provide the same restorative impacts that we want to see from the overall project, right? You'd have to probably, like I said, reinforce the pipe. It would probably impact. And I know the team has spent a lot of time developing this channel design, and that's probably a lot of work to do to go back and completely make that adjustment. But there probably are some alternatives there that
Well, the simple description, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, is if you leave the pipe where it is, even if you make some of these around the edges changes, aren't you going to eventually impede the flow of the creek? Is that a true statement?
Yeah, that's potential, but there's
under the current channel design. So I don't know. That was one of the questions that I had asked the design team was, what is the impact of adjusting that channel design? And
I can answer that if you want. They are in the process of updating the memo as per Peter's request. And they did look at channel design, and the reality is that unfortunately that pipe is just at exactly the wrong elevation. So if we changed channel elevations, then it potentially impacts other infrastructure. So things like the UP rail line that's crossing the channel. And it also wouldn't allow us to do natural floodplain restoration, which is where our funding is coming from. So NOAA Fisheries is the one funding the design. So it puts our funding at risk.
Can I clarify here, Peter? We're talking about two different increases, kind of. There's the increase to add the project to the CIP, where it is not currently. And then there's kind of a separate increase that would be the ongoing operations and maintenance.
yeah.
How long, that first increase that's just to add the project to the CIP, like a ballpark of how much that would cost, and how long are you adding that to a ratepayer's bill?
Well, it depends on what the project ultimately costs, what that component costs. So, and it depends on if it's a project that we try to pay through, sort of the pay-as-you-go structure that we've generally used on lots of projects, or if we finance it to begin service, or if we finance it through the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. That I think is an option. And that Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund offers some forgivable principal and some lower interest rate. So, I think it also, there's the other piece of it, that I think that as I'm looking at it is like,
Recognizing that we have these other projects, our water treatment projects that
has a significant cost component to it that will require some financing of some sort.
This is the PFAS project?
The PFAS project that we have a regulatory compliance schedule that we have to meet. So, it's looking at those pieces and trying to recognize that there's impacts to our water, wastewater repayment that wouldn't exist but for this project.
Peter, can I jump in there? So I can recognize it's probably a little frustrating to get, it could have a ratepayer impact that we can't tell you an exact number. Peter's working with the consultant on that, and as soon as we can bring that to you, we've got many CIP milestones coming up. We've got September 9th, we've got the November Budget Committee meeting. So I just want to recognize, we wish we could come to you today and say it's going to be exactly this much and it's going to be exactly this, and we can't do that. But we do want to daylight this from you and get some direction from you on, we know this is a priority project, we love this project, we want to see it happen. But we also don't want to hit you with a surprise when we come to those rate designs and say, there's going to be a cost here and there's going to be maybe alternatives on how we fund that and some unknowns about whether we can qualify for the loan or not. So really, it's just daylighting that for you and getting your direction so that as these fine folks work with these fine folks, they're knowing they're moving forward with the backing of you all in the direction you've given them. Does that make sense?
Interject, and I apologize, we keep kind of chiming in from the peanut gallery here, but.
We should have put this on a regular session.
If we could really just kind of clarify from the leadership team, the project perspective, we don't think additional city funds are going to be necessary for the construction of this. I recognize it's an increased workload for public works. There's no question, and I think we are hopeful that we can help with that. But between the funds the city is already dedicated to the project, the strong potential for $2 million of loan forgiveness through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, Metro, et cetera, we are going with that at the assumption.
I will say, because I am working with Oregon Department of Business Development right now on our Safe Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund application that has some significant principal forgiveness. There's still a payment associated with it. You still have an interest payments that you have to make. So there are those costs that are impacted. And my understanding with the Clean Water one, it's up to $2 million. There's still sort of that eligibility list. There's billions of dollars on that project right now. And it sounds like there's a good chance that this would make the cut, but there's always still like only so much funds available. So recognizing like there's these pieces of the puzzle, but we haven't connected them all together. That in my mind, there's still like a gap, and I don't know what that is and what's that impact to the ratepayers.
So can we talk about the operation and maintenance? That's the part I'd like to think between earmarks and revolving loans and things, we could get a lot of the construction costs covered. I'd like to have a better understanding of the operation and maintenance ongoing costs. I live across the street from the one in Island Station. There are people in city trucks who come most days of the week, maybe 5 days a week, and check on it. But they aren't there for more than 10 minutes, typically.
Right. So we check every pump station there is a week. I think it's Monday. We do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Those are the general days of the week. It's 2 people. They go out to make sure things are running and functional. They are below ground facilities. with the exception of our Brookside facility, so it does take them some time to get set up and get the appropriate safety things set up. But, I think we're looking, every day, those 5 pump stations that they're doing, there's 2 people going out there. It's about, a half hour to an hour that they're spending at different pump stations during those rounds. So, 3.5 to 5 hours a day that they spend going out there and do that. So we add another one, there's another half hour to an hour in terms of time for 2 people. So, it's, roughly 160 hours a year per pump station, almost 1,000, so almost half of an FTE per year.
And
That's just the preventive routine maintenance, so those preventative maintenance checks. So then we also do quarterly cleanings where we go in with, some additional equipment and do some detailed cleaning. And then there's the repair and maintenance that we have to do.
So, certainly when you have a newer pump station, hopefully it's constructed right, you don't have
issues. But, as things age, there's costs associated with that.
So we just did the whole SCADA thing that presumably gives you data from all these things. Are they all 30, 40, 50 years old, or do we have a more newer one? The technology all the same that it was then, or will a newer one have less things that can go wrong?
Yeah, technology is always improving. It becomes more, in some cases, more complex, which requires us to get additional consultants to troubleshoot problems. Like when we add, like SCADA is something that provides a huge benefit in terms of remotely monitoring. But it also provides some challenges when there's a problem. We don't necessarily have like all the SCADA issues, right? We add things to improve energy efficiency and
variable frequency jobs, which is an electric component
that helps make motors run more efficiently by turning the motor on full blast when it starts or pumps. So it sort of ramps up the motor. Those can be complex to make sure that they're working. So there's complexity that comes with technology. But generally, we're making improvements to the system. We have a project in our CIP, Brookside Pump Station. I think we have it currently budgeted $500,000, and we're just replacing pumps. We're basically the project's replacing the water and replace the current pumps with submersible pumps. That will go into the system. But so there are costs associated with that as well.
Yeah, so part of this conversation, especially about the sewer line, is what Emma said, we wanted to daylight some of the bigger issues. This is not an insignificant project. Like, this is a significant CIP project for the city of Milwaukie. I would love to walk out of here with an understanding of your concerns related to that, operations and maintenance, obviously the construction itself, and also pursuing funding opportunities that are going to be a little bit more expensive. If we do pursue any kind of loan there is interest in this, it's not free, it's more expensive. And if there's any concerns with that, love to hear them. If not, also love to hear that as well. So kind of walking away with some of the box that we're playing in. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I spoke with Neil as well. I hadn't read the packet before then, and I hadn't really considered how much it might affect the affordability goal. And that's kind of where my concern is. And I know we don't really have a lot of figures for that. And I think that's where I'm trying to get more information on, because what I'm trying to avoid is because this is part of I support the project, right? This is a project that's been going on for a while and is, part of our green spaces, right? And that goal. But what I want to avoid is for one goal to bleed into another. And then this potential project minimizing the impact that what we're trying to do on affordability has on our residents. So that's why I'm trying to figure out, I want to know more about what the costs, what the impact is going to be on the rates, because we are also voting on a public safety fee this evening.
And I think we'll have some information to share, hopefully shortly. So like I said, I've seen the preliminary analysis. I've asked for some more questions
To make sure that we consider those things, and then once I get that, we'll get that information to you.
I do think the one other piece that I think the other question was, incorporating this CIP project into sort of our larger CIP. Like, one of the things that we talked about with budget committee was, as it relates to affordability, was trying to make sure that our CIP was, realistic and executable. And to do that, that's making sure that, using, and there's a funding component to that, and there's also the resource component to that. So there's trade-offs there. So like we're adding another project that's a priority, that means there's a trade-off on something else that one of our engineers are working on as a project manager. So that's something that we need to consider as well. So,
And we can share more, examples specifically of what those kinds of projects that might have to get funded would be. Again, we're not asking you to say today, yes, no, sewer project. We just are looking for that direction so that as staff proceed forward with the project team, they're doing so mindful of what your questions are, your concerns are, and your priorities.
So if I may speak to this, cover a little bit of ground here, is that, the issue is, it's kind of a hard one. It's a hard point, really, because I see that the decision has to be made fairly short order, because it impacts all the follow-on work for the restoration project. Okay, all kinds of things that we've discussed here. And so I don't think we have a lot of time. I think we have some time. But if we're going to do something here, we're going to have to proceed because the partners have follow-on work that could be greatly impacted based upon that decision. Secondly, I understand the concerns about affordability, but I think that this project feeds, two of the other goals, and that is obviously parks and green space comes to mind, and actually economic development. Because if we develop this could be quite a draw and could enhance economic development, certainly in those areas. I think my biggest concern is the worst case scenario is that if we sink $1,000 or $5 million in this project, then the follow-on funding that are somewhat unconcerned about for the bigger project, the big, project, dam removal and restoration project, if that doesn't come, this is sunk money that, maybe we didn't need. So that's my biggest point of concern and biggest risk, okay? That's the worst case scenario. I don't want that to happen, trust me. But I'm just telling you, things have changed since January on the funding end. And so that's my biggest concern.
I appreciate that, Mr. Massey.
Yeah, and just one question. I'll stop talking. How old is it?
74.
2074.
Councilor Massey, can I just ask a follow-on question that you can absolutely say, no, city manager, stay where I won't answer this. But to that $1 million question of the worst case scenario or the sort of uncertainty, is there, and I also hear you that we can't dither on this for a long time. It holds up the whole project. But is there any kind of threshold or level of confidence or milestone you'd want to see that would make you feel more comfortable? And I know you're going to say, I'm not answering that, city managers anymore.
It's the universal answer. It depends.
It depends.
It depends. I mean, I like to put on a happy face and be optimistic, but at the same time, things have changed since January.
If I can interject again, I think the other side of that coin, and we obviously have all been navigating all the changes since January and will continue to do so, is without moving that sewer pipe, this project might not be able to go forward. It poses enough engineering challenges and acquisition challenges if we can't move equipment up the creek across that pipe, that it doesn't. And we could ask that question the other way, saying, even, if we are able to raise funds for the project, but the sewer pipe is still there, it creates a lot of big engineering costs and logistical problems.
Good point.
Why can't the project though be incorporated with the bigger project intent first? So it's out of the way.
That's basically what we're trying to do.
But it's not if it's putting it in our CIP, because then I'm in charge of delivering that.
That's true. That's a good point.
If you're asking in terms of the delivery agency or the pipe
Yeah,
project is?
I mean, I feel like that's been the question of like, they want the city to take on the project and do it before the dam removal project. And I have the same concern as Councilor Massey, is that but if the project doesn't move forward and we spend all this money moving this this pipeline and putting in this lift station and it doesn't move forward. So I'm just, why can't we align that so the project actually does the work, does the engineering, and does the construction of it?
The plan is for the Kellogg design team to do the engineering and the design, the in-water permitting. And that would just leave the city with the above ground, outside the waterway permitting. That would, my understanding, not an engineer, obviously, would be that's mostly city permits right away. The reason for doing it earlier is obviously thinking about to have uninterrupted sewer service during construction. Obviously, people will still be flushing their toilets when we're in construction, so that line can get capped and just left in place, and then the project will remove it when we do the in-water work period, but it will remove it empty. So I don't know if that answered your question.
That'd be helpful. I want to bring it back to this table. I appreciate the comments. You can also see part of the tension and part of the complexity and the nuance of this issue. And that there are actually, there's having the same goal and having some different missions at the same time is challenging. And so that's what we're trying to expose and also provide some understanding as it relates to this project. Yeah, there is a timing issue. There's also a lot of questions about funding in the future. That's why I don't feel comfortable going, yeah, let's 100% right now, pull all this levers. That's why.
So I will say, when I first heard about this pipe, I thought, oh, there's big apartment, hundreds of people living on, in Miramont Lodge, and there's hundreds of people living in apartments on the other side, and it's a great opportunity for pedestrian bridge across the new creek and the pipe attached to the pedestrian bridge. I guess what I'm hearing is that either way, you have to have a pump station, so that doesn't solve the need for having a pump station. And if that's true, then the pedestrian bridge, where the paths of pedestrians go is probably better resolved on its own timeline. I guess I'm for moving forward on it, because I do feel that, yes, we're in a weird, we're not going to see funding as soon as we'd hoped, maybe on the federal scale. But this is, if you read the temperature report, this is a huge contributor this will make a huge difference in the Willamette River temperature and the outputs that we're putting into the Willamette river. Getting rid of this lake and having the creeks flow through will address the temperature thing that was just raised earlier tonight by our stormwater. I do think that and other things will mean it will get funded. It will maybe not get funded as soon as we'd hoped. But I do think it will eventually get funding. So I feel like we should deal with this, get it out of the way so that it doesn't become a hiccup in future funding requests. That's my take on it.
I guess I'm trying to understand the dynamics. I don't quite understand the exchange about who's the best partner responsible for delivering this project. And I think I would want to see, I think frankly that's outside of what we're responsible for, but I'd like some clarity there on who would be best suited to deliver the project. I think I see what Jen is saying, if this can be included in the scope of the grants that our partners are going for. Are they able to bring this? I think don't understand that, but we'll understand a bit more. I'm still a little confused. If we add a $5 million project to our CIP, how long, if we're doing pay as we go, is it saying over a 24-month period, we have to raise $5 million in our sewer rates?
It could be, or we're not doing other projects that we have identified in our CDP. That would get pushed. So, that could be our waiver room. That's a project that we have under design. If that's one way you can push and defer projects that we have identified in our CIP that we have. Waverly's under design, but that would be one. There are other projects that we utilizing wastewater funding for that, if this was the priority, those projects might get deferred, but there's impacts to that, right? So.
And we can pursue the revolving loan, which could forgive some of that principal. It's just, I think respectfully, it's not a full guarantee. And there you'd be also assuming ongoing loan payments.
So the loan we would have to repay in full over time.
There's a portion of loan forgiveness.
But you're still paying 1% interest on what's not forgiven, right?
It's more than that. It's more than that.
It's more.
Oh, it's more than that.
Yes.
Could be up to 4.
State revolving loan right now is at 3.3% interest rate and $2 million of grants. It's
And I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we add this CIP, we either have to bump a project or increase costs on repairs. So it's a natural happen. If we want to add $5 million to our CIP over 24 months, with the handy numbers we have about the number of different ratepayers from our public safety fee that we're doing later, over a 24-month period, that would be a $21 increase over those 24 months. Is that accurate? Is that what is the ballpark of funding that we're asking?
Just given time and given, I think these are great questions and I know it's so frustrating. I think though, from what I'm hearing is you really care about impact ratepayers. You want us to proceed with this work with our rate design consultant to look at scenarios here and bring that back. But I'm not hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing no, I don't want to entertain it. Bye-bye, Kellogg. I think I'm hearing this is still a priority. We do have some concerns. We want greater information on ratepayer impact, on options for who manages the project and how that would be funded, both in the construction phase and the O&M phase.
I also think we ought to be thinking about congressional appropriations, both congressional and state. We shouldn't give up. They have been, the state and our legislators have been handing money to Sandy for their sewer system and Malala and all kinds of cities. You can see big lists of the cities that are getting appropriations. We haven't tried to go to that well, and maybe we need to go to that well.
Even that though is There's a lot of uncertainty in funding right now, it seems like, and either one is going to cost us, either it's going to, the one certainty though is that it is going to cost our ratepayers. And we just don't know
I
how
don't think
much.
that's, well, I
I mean,
mean,
it is,
well, the increased operation and maintenance is going to cost something. yes.
right? And then depending on, depending on the interest rate of what you get paid, because the forgiveness isn't guaranteed. We're also putting in an application for the PFAS stuff, right? So isn't that like double dipping in the same,
It's a different
fund? Okay, good.
I guess my big thing here, the reason I raise these funding questions, I want to get yes, because I frankly don't see a way that the project goes forward without addressing the sewer problem. And I do not want to be the city that unilaterally fails what would be an amazing project for green space, for like connectivity over across the highway. But if we're talking about raising by $21 a month our utility bills for residents or like huge impacts on our CIP, I am a little worried.
I don't think we would see something like that.
And I guess more what I'm saying is I want to understand exactly the trade-offs as soon as possible before, I don't want us to get to a position where we've implicitly said yes and we have no choice but to say yes when it comes to setting our rates or redesigning our CIP.
I think that what I'm also hearing, what Emma is that if it's moving forward, yes, having ratepayers in mind for sure, which means honestly on the funding instructions and talking to chiefs. For sure. You want the least impact.
And I think, also there's maybe some direction to our project team liaisons that to go back and say, well, we talked to our council, kind of not in the room right now. We can go back, we went to our council, we heard, they re-emphasized their support for this project, but their legitimate concerns are ratepayer impact, CIP capacity impact, and certainty. And so we need also, I think you put it well, you want to know those trade-offs as soon as possible. So then we also need some deadlines from the project team side about when this we need to make a call on this so that, I think that's the exchange that happens between the project team based on this feedback.
And I will say, I think if you look at the wastewater fund and the water fund, they're both in different places, right? The water fund has a lot of capital needs that we have to do under compliance related to PFAS and treating that. On our wastewater side, our CIP there is a little bit smaller. And I think when you look at big picture, just to maybe big picture, I think there's more wastewater reserves available than there are water reserves. So I don't see a $21 impact. I think there's some ways to sort of massage it, and it may look better than we think than it's not necessarily doing. If there's an impact.
We want to daylight that and make sure again, as these folks go forward, they're not saying something that's out of step with your concerns, questions, and policy.
I ought to say that with what I know now, with the information I've gathered, I'm leaning more towards with this new information. Because I don't know if there's a lot of projects on our CIP list that have been made so long that people have been waiting for. And I don't know how comfortable I am with putting the responsibility where the project may not, we might not see funding for a while, and putting the cost of that on the residents right now with so much uncertainty. Donald Trump's still president, so I'm not looking to the feds.
We'll have some more information. Sure. Great impacts.
And again, it could change. And again, there's just been so much more information given to me just from the packet and from what we're talking about now that there's more uncertainty. And I just think we have to protect our residents from uncertainty as well.
And if I were to speak to the partners directly, if they were here in this room, I think we might say something like, all of us here want to get to yes, but there are some real uncertainties that we see. But like knowing if we say no, we are likely killing this project, which is really a serious blow to people in our community who've worked for years to make this happen. Especially at a time when it seemed like such a whimsical idea. Suddenly now it's remotely possible. Amazing. And so I think, know that like you have 4+1 remote people who really want to get to us, but it is just ironing out these logistical challenges as quickly as possible and telling us what we need to do to be able to meet that.
We have 5 minutes left for 2 other.
So, I mean, the basic question was, do you want us to proceed? Is that right?
Well, I knew that you wanted us to proceed. This is how, which I feel like I have enough. I also have some good questions from Councilor Body that we need to go back and provide.
I think we know the box, to use your analogy. I think we know the box with which the staff can go back and engage with the project team to get further information.
Great. Topic 2. I think this will be, I'll try. So that's really helpful. We're going to talk about conservation easements, but if you look at this kind of overview of the project area, so obviously the impact when we take out the dam, yet we lower the water level. The water's been hitting our property and private property at a certain level for many, many years. So when we remove that, it's going to drop that water level and change. It's going to impact the property. As part of that is part of the consequence of how we're going to put it to this project. We have to, it was at the very beginning, it was nice to have, but possibly asking property owners to have conservation easements so that we could expand the project area and actually restore what we have envisioned this to be. It has now become a little bit more weighty of an issue. There's ODOT requirements for contracts and federal funding requirements that as we move forward with this project, that we need to have these types of legal instruments on private property that when there's impacts in order to construction. The city has been in contact with Metro because they have dollars for this. They have expertise for this. We do not. And we've been working with our partners in Metro to help to begin the conversation and start NIGA, create the scope, to go out and have negotiations, conversations with all these private property owners, potentially getting a conservation easement, which the city would be the holder of. And we would use partners as well as ourselves to maintain in perpetuity of the project. That's fast. I don't know if that even makes sense at this point, but
Do you have a list of parcels?
we do, not as part of this. There's about 20 plus properties.
I mean, if we're doing this, I guess just harking back to like conversations in 2008, 2009 around this, I mean, I assume if you're a streamside owner, you couldn't just put up a fence and fence what's your property. You don't have to give us an easement. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one answer.
Yeah.
The other side, which is a little even heavier, is I still don't know if we can't get 100% of those impacted. If we don't get 100% to agree to a conservation easement or some kind of indemnification, I don't know if we have to pursue or at least consider the pursuit of eminent domain, which I've been sharing that's not been an appetite at the onset of this project. I don't know if that changes, but I think it's noted that's that conversation out there. Many grants and opportunities of 4 grants do not allow that. So it would be right now that would be city cost covering the acquisition and those pursuits and all and possible legal disputes. So that's also kind of in the background.
So are you saying that, I mean, let's assume all of them said, no, we're just going to put up a fence on our property line. Does that impact our ability to does that impact the grants and the restoration?
Maybe. We're working on potential, what we're figuring out now, and maybe that came out the right way. Meeting today, that was part. We're trying to figure out what the legal instrument needs to be. If they can just say, I don't want the city to have any piece of this property. I want my private property to be the type of line and they put a fence. That's great. And they sign something. That's one way. But if it needs to be an easement or it needs to be some kind of acquisition of some sort, that's something we're figuring. So this is me letting you know that we're trying to find the best use of expertise and money that's not ours to pursue this and try to find a good solution here. But there's a lot of us. Yeah.
Like the sewer discussion, this is us not really asking for a yes, no on something.
Yeah.
It's a daylighting something, so there's no surprises down the road if this becomes a thing that, yeah.
I guess I'm surprised at the implication that we haven't been having these conversations. Not we, but the project team hasn't been having these conversations with the landowners.
Yes, a good comment. Also, in my understanding, it wasn't imperative. It wasn't imperative to me at least, and to a few others on the project team, that this was even a thing that we absolutely needed for project success. Until we started that. So that's a bit new. If we knew this, 2 years ago, like this was you have to do this, then certainly be talking differently and engaging differently with property owners.
I'm surprised by the number too. I thought there was only
It's grown.
3 or 4.
It's grown. That's kind of where we started, and then it's grown over the last.
Some of those properties in the second stretch.
Yeah, impact varies, obviously. Some are a lot, some are.
What's behind her number 3?
Yeah, this. Coho. We have one time thought Coho was going to be done, and at least done construction, right? And then Kellogg would come and it would build around what was already built. That's not the case. They're kind of on these 2 similar tracks now. Timing is, we don't know, actually. We don't have a full sense of yet of when one's going to construct one's the other. So trying to design around conceptual is really difficult. We've tried to put the two teams together, the project team, design team on both sides of the table together. And we had some good conversations at first, but with some moving conversations that we're going to have with Fareed, BlackRock, the developer, in October. Hopefully more things will come to light. But there's just there's a lot of unclarity. We don't have clarity on where this is at. And we don't have clarity of when Kellogg will be fully funded or anything else. So there's just this tension between designs and there's potential impacts. We have been, at this point, staff has been at least presenting as if we care about both these projects. Oh my gosh, we've been talking about the Kellogg for decades. We've been talking about Coho for almost 10 years now. So for having us to say one is more important than the other right now is we're trying to find other ways to get to yes. And if that is not true for this council, then please let me know if that's concerning us to change our approach there. But again, you also will find out more information about Coho points and its status, hopefully 27th or the 7th of October, I think.
So were the issues,
November.
well, the issues design issues, or are they project funding issues?
But as far as the 2 projects interfacing, it's design. It's the conceptual design from Coho. It's impacting that wall is obviously significant, that you see in this rendering.
Yeah.
And that has connected issues with how we're approaching the pedestrian underpass. What's going to connect to who's building around. It's design issues between the 2.
So you said, you made a statement that I thought I heard you say was one project is not more important than the other.
That's how we've been approaching these.
I'm not sure I would agree.
That's what we would love to hear tonight. Because again, we want to make sure we represent the view of our policymakers when we're at these tables.
Kellogg Creek was supposed to be a couple.
I would say I would continue with the approach. Have they had any talks about scaling that back though, potentially, to avoid the wall issue?
Not that I had been privy to, but
I'm no structural engineer, but it's my understanding they're going to need a wall either way.
Right.
I guess in my mind, October 7th isn't that far away. If we hold the course of, they're both important to us until October 7th, and maybe we know more about what's going on with Coho.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that we wouldn't, continue to have this conversation. But in the big picture, Kellogg's looking at work.
I kind of agree with the mayor. Let's see what happens on the 7th. I think the one other thing I might add is it's not two parties. I think the city and our TSP, one of the projects that we've listed is helping fund some of that underpass. So the extent to which we can help find some type of concert between the two, I'm supportive.
Councilor Kellogg, I forgot.
Yeah, stay the course.
Okay. That's great. 4 minutes over. Thank you. I know it's a weighty conversation because it's such an important project.
Yeah.
Important project. Just thank you for that. Thank you for providing something there. And we'll probably be back with more conversations in the future.
And I just want to say again, because I know it's an odd dynamic, I thank our partners for being here. Joseph and I come from the metaphor of like, this is sort of family dinner. This family cares a lot about this, and we care a lot about some other things. We had to have a family dinner where we sort of daylight some things. I appreciate you coming to our family dinner.
And I apologize for, it's easy to get started or getting stopped.
Actually, I appreciate it. In my
Oh, yes.
There's obviously a lot.
We are adjourned.
Nailed it.
Turn it off. Yeah.